25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back into part 2 of our Big Ten preview, along with Garrett Turney and Trey Reeves. I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to have you with us. If you listened to part 1, we're glad to have you back. If you are new and have discovered our channel through the start of preview season, we'd love to have you listen to part 1. We did teams 18 through 11 in the Big Ten Conference, and now we get into the top 10. A reminder of how this works. We put out a survey for each of the Power 4 conferences and let you, the listener, determine which way they were ranked, 1 through 18 in the case of the Big Ten, and we are previewing them in reverse power order as decided by you. So as I mentioned, 18 through 11 in episode 1. This episode is teams 10 through 6. This episode and all of our episodes during preview season are brought to you by the good brand, homefieldapparel.com. You can get 15% off your order by using our code 3TechPod at checkout, or if you're a return customer, use the link in our bio and help support the show. But guys, without further ado, let's dive back in. Part 2 of the Big Ten, and we are at number 10 with the Maryland Terrapins. And guys, let me tell you right now, the Terrapins are too low on this list. Their over-under for this season is 6.5, and I'm going to tell you that we are a lock to go over that. I've got the Terrapins going at least 8-4, potentially 9-3, depending on what MJ Morris does as the new quarterback for the Terps. Mike Locksley has historically had an issue winning in October, breaking through that 8-win glass ceiling. But I'm telling you, it's going to happen this year for a couple of reasons. Number one, they've got a new quarterback in MJ Melendez. Talia Tagovailoa is gone to the Canadian Football League, actually. And while he set a bunch of program records and threw the ball all over the lot, he had a tendency at times to throw the ball to the wrong jersey, especially when it mattered most. Like last 2 minutes of ball game, you could almost set your watch to Talia throwing a game-sealing interception, maybe inside the red zone. MJ Morris got limited action last year at NC State. He got 4 games worth of action when Brennan Armstrong got pulled, showed what he could do, and then said, you know what, coach, I'm good. I'm going to redshirt the rest of this year. I'll hit the portal and see you later. He ends up at Maryland. On the ground, Roman Hemby is the name to know. He's the starting running back for the Terps, averaged 4.8 yards a pop. Oh, by the way, Colby McDonald, who's the bowling ball running back, he got 5.8 a pop on the ground last year. So expect Maryland to run the ball more effectively this year. The defense is interesting because in the front 7, I really like what they have. They've got some nice linebackers. The front 4 should be improved this year. Their defense was 30th in the country in total defense a season ago, and I believe they've got 7 of those returning starters coming back. They were 21st at defending the pass as well. That might be the stat to watch because the secondary is going to have at least 3 new starters this season. But if Maryland can defend the pass, somewhat effectively, I like where we are as a defense. The critical stretch for Maryland here, and this is a very workable schedule. I've got it at Oregon through Penn State. Now, that's their last 4 on the schedule. In front of that is a very, very winnable slate of games. In fact, guys, their schedule looks like this: UConn, Michigan State, at Virginia, Villanova, at Indiana, a bye week, Northwestern, USC, at Minnesota, and then you get their run of at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, and at Penn State. What if I told you that Maryland could very well be undefeated going into an October 19th date with the USC Trojans, which is homecoming, and they would walk away with a win in that ballgame? Call me crazy, but I think it's very possible for Maryland to not only get to that 8-win plateau, but also break through it get to 9, maybe 10 wins if we're talking something special. Over under, as I said, 6.5. I'm smashing the over. I love the Terrapins. They're one of my darlings this year to be one of the most fun teams to watch in college football.
Mitch, what if I told you I'd be more surprised if they weren't undefeated going into that USC game?
Right?
Because that you highlighted the defense, really strong unit last year that brings a lot of starters back. The offense lost some guys, but I really like MJ Morris as a portal pickup for the quarterback position. I think that's going to be a clear upgrade over Talia, which is saying something because he put up a lot of nice numbers. I like the Terps too this year, man. And I love that they don't have to play in the old Big Ten East. That's the number one thing they have going for them.
Yeah, I also love the Terps this year, but Mitch and Trey, you both have made some what if I told you statements. Well, what if I told you they should have done the same thing last year? Because look at the paper, look at what the game looked like ahead of the season. I picked them as my darling last year. I made crazy statements about them maybe going.
They were undefeated. They were undefeated going into their first big game last year.
Sure were. And then the season fell apart because that's sometimes what happens. And so, look, for me, I am not going to rag on Maryland, okay? I got the Terps shirt hanging up back there. Okay, it's that nice little red one tucked behind the SMU one. I'm a fan of the Terps. I like the Terps. I want the Terps to do well. I am thrilled that they don't have to play Ohio State or Michigan this year. That's a big one. Look, end of the day, you know, it's not just those games that have been tripping them up, right? They've actually played pretty competitively in those. It seems like Maryland likes to play just at the level of competition they're playing. It doesn't seem like they come out and really blow teams out of the water that frequently. Doesn't seem like they come out and really get dominated by teams all that frequently, right? Sometimes the score turns out to be something, but if you watch the game, it really wasn't all that bad. They were in that Ohio State game last year for a long stretch of time up until they kind of just choked it away at the end. We said that about them the year prior as well. And so again, like I'm just going to have to sit here and say, Terps, I love you. Please, like, figure it out this year and give us something cool to root for because 6-0 and then upsetting USC would be a heck of a storyline. I'm already looking forward to, Saturday night on October 19th and we get to come on here live and be like, guys, there were some storylines today. We're going to start with Maryland and talk about them upsetting USC and being, 7-0 and looking at them saying, are they going to be 8-0 going into Oregon? They got a bye week. What's going on? Like, I hope that that's what we're talking about. I said it last episode. I'm going to say it again. Press X to doubt. I just don't know. I can't really sit here and, and tell you with full confidence that they're not going to find a way to drop the game at Virginia. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. But they might just find a way to do it.
They've largely won the ones they're supposed to. Locally. If they're playing at home, especially. I can't remember. Is that Virginia game? It is.
I believe it's on the road.
Yeah, they find a way to lose to teams like Indiana
or Purdue, Illinois last year, or Northwestern last year. I mean,
they're at home. They take care of business. On the road, I agree.
They lost to Illinois at home by 3.
It's stepping on landmines that you didn't see possible on the road, and it's losing the big game at home by 40. Like that's been Maryland football over the last couple of years, right? I mean, remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago when they had that big,
I know exactly what game you're talking
big
about.
Clash with Iowa and Trey, you and I on this show talked to, or was it on? Maybe was it before the show?
It was pre-show, but it was in our previous.
It was in our group text.
Yep.
And we were so confident. We talked ourselves into Maryland winning that game, and then they just got
a win over a top 10 Iowa team.
That's right. And then they just got boat raced.
Defense, and they did get Penn State last year at home, which, by the way, lost that one 51-15. Like that was to cap off a 4-game losing streak before they finally came back and beat Nebraska by 3 in an ugly game. So look, like, I want to root for the Terps. Yep. I want to root for the Terps. I want to buy in. I want to give all my analytical skill to this one and say, well, quarterback play and the running backs aren't too bad. I love Roman Hemby. He's an underrated running back. He's one of the more underrated in the country. They got good receivers out there. Ty Felton, quality receiver. Like, there's good receivers out there. There's good guys on that defensive side of the ball. Come on. Don't do this to me again.
This is the year. I'm telling you. This is the year. I like Jordan Phillips anchoring that defensive line. 3 out of 4 returning starters. They've got 2 returning linebackers. I mentioned they have to rebuild the secondary, so we'll see what that looks like against the more pass happy offenses. They're certainly going to have to defend the pass if they're going to upset USC. But that's an upset that I've called for. I fully expect Maryland to win that game at home. If they do, 8-9 wins absolutely on the cards for the Terps this season. They're number 10 on our list as governed by you. Number 9 in the Big Ten preseason poll, the Washington Huskies. Boy, it was a fun run for Washington last year, wasn't it? Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix Jr., Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan. I could go on and on, right? They had a special year. They had a special season, and all of that is gone now. And Washington was one of those programs that was hit so tragically by the portal with DeBoer leaving and everybody either going to Alabama or elsewhere. And I'll be honest, I don't really know what to make of the Huskies this season. Now, Trey, when you look at who they have as head coach, Jed Fish comes in from Arizona. He's been to every program in the country at one time or another. He brings Will Rogers in from Mississippi State. But where does Washington go after winning the Pac-12 and nearly winning a national championship game? Like, where do they fit in now in this new look Big Ten?
I think 9 is about right. I think our listeners really nailed the placing because you could see this season come together really well. I love the pickup of Will Rogers out of the portal. That was a huge win for Jed Fish to hold on to him because he originally committed to Kalen DeBoer, and huge to hold on to him. But they just have so many unknowns, as you mentioned. I looked it up, guys. They return 206 rushing yards, and they return 190 receiving yards. That's it from that electric offense last year. That's what's coming back. Obviously, they're picking up some guys that are experienced. Will Rogers was one of the most prolific passers in the SEC under Mike Leach, but it's going to be really interesting. Now, what got overlooked last year with the Huskies, and we highlighted a lot on this show, but the offense really covered up the glaring lack of pass defense and just defense in general. You could throw on the Huskies last year, even with the talented guys that they got in that backfield. Jabbar Muhammad, left for Oregon, but he was a mainstay in that defensive backfield. Michelle Powell, down in Miami now, but they got some guys that I think can at least improve that unit. I think, you look at Ephesians Prysock, I think that's how you say his last name.
Yeah.
But coming up from Arizona, a lot of guys that can come in and backfill that defensive backfield. That's the one spot I'm looking at if you can find one that might improve from last year, because everything else reached its height that you're going to see at Washington, right? So you're really just wondering what's next. Jed Fish, all the hotness on the coaching boards, every big program that had a vacancy last year, it seemed like interviewed him. He finally lands at Washington after the whole Saban saga. So I'm really interested in what he can do after that big season at Arizona, but it's just a fresh start. It's a complete rebuild. You're starting with a little bit more than some other programs we talked about on the last episode, just because of the name brand of Washington and getting some clout from that, but it's going to be a full rebuild, and the schedule's not easy. They do have a lot of the West Coast teams, so that helps, I think, a little bit when you're talking about playing USC and UCLA, who we're both a little bit lower on, or all a little bit lower on, and getting the end of the year game against Oregon is going to be difficult. But that stretch to end the season, USC through Oregon, that's going to define just how good year one can be. The over-under is set at 7.5. There's a lot of rebuilding to do. I think you can squint and find 8 wins on the schedule, especially early on. Weber State, Eastern Michigan, Washington State's going to be a really interesting game because of all the off-the-field dynamics that they have. We'll talk about that in the Civil War Platypus Cup for Oregon as well next episode. But Northwestern, you could see them starting 4-0, I think, on that schedule. Rutgers, Michigan, and Iowa, that's a really tough middle. Then you close, and then you get a break kind of at Indiana. But, of course, I'm high on Indiana. I think that's the one Indiana's going to be trying to win. So that close, though, USC at Penn State, UCLA at Oregon, I think you're doing cartwheels as a Washington fan if you go 2-2.
Sure.
And that stretch and I think you're easily in a bowl game if you do that. And there's a lot to be excited about going forward if Jedd Fisch can pull that off.
I think if Rodgers can get back to throwing the ball down the field, right? Under Zach Arnett, he was just the check down merchant, and that Mississippi State offense was terrible. But you've got a decent back in Jonah Coleman coming up from Arizona. He had over 1,100 scrimmage yards last year. He's a good running back one. You've got wide receivers who are talented. Jeremiah Hunter waited patiently behind all the studs in the stable that Washington has had in that wide receiver room the past several years. You've got Giles Jackson as well. There are pieces there. And as you mentioned, the defense is talented. It's just such a conglomeration of transfers. I mean, guys, they have one returning starter, one projected returning starter from last year's roster, and it's a linebacker. So it will be 11 fresh faces on the offensive side and 10 fresh faces on the defensive side. That's just really hard to project to play, successful brand of ball, especially against that schedule. So I think 7-5, I think under Jedd Fisch in year one with that schedule, I would be happy with that as a Washington fan, at least as a floor, right? That has to be the springboard, but as a floor, I think 7-5 would certainly be fine given all the upheaval. It's a whole new program, a whole new direction, and Jedd Fisch is at the wheel of the Washington Huskies. At number 8, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And oh boy, Trey, you and Garrett both are selling some hopium with this pick. Nebraska Cornhuskers are in year 2 under Matt Rule, who traditionally has a terrible first year, but not last year. In 2023, Matt Rule broke his program trend of winning 2 or 3 games. He went 5-7, and Nebraska had 3 straight shots to get to a bowl game with game-winning drives. Unfortunately, I think all 3 of those ended with a game-sealing interception, either thrown by Jeff Sims or Chubba Purdy. So those guys are gone to other programs now. Garrett, this is a team that you picked as one of your darlings. Offensively, they should be a lot of fun. Defensively, they're talented. Where does Nebraska fit in with the Big Ten this season?
Probably close to the top. And I would argue fighting for a playoff spot in year 2 of Matt Rule, right? Year 2 of Matt Rule is where things really start to take off. We've talked about it ad nauseum, and I repeat a little bit of it, but first thing I want to do is just say kind of like some of our takes to the Nebraska fan base. We have a comment on YouTube saying thanks for the therapy with some of our Nebraska takes. So appreciate you, Cornhusker Nation. But yeah, it's been a fun one talking about Nebraska this offseason. Here's the deal. Matt Rule, year 2 is, tried and true improvement. And by the way, they went 5-7 last year, so it's not half bad, right? Normally those Matt Rule rebuilds, you rip it down to the studs, you win 1 or 2 games against, the little bitty teams, and you don't win anything else, right? He's got plenty of talent. You're bringing in a phenom quarterback. He's going to be, one of the better ones in the next couple of years. It's going to be about how quickly can he ascend to that tier. He gets a real soft open to his schedule. You bring back a whole bunch of players. They did really well in the transfer portal. This is, it's just cooking the right direction for Nebraska. And I understand that, our fans and everybody else, y'all put them at 8. I get that. We are underrating Nebraska here as I think as a college football, sort of conglomerate here. I don't think that we are rating Nebraska that high. They did nothing on offense. They were just atrocious on offense last year. You look at some of the numbers, they did not have a 1,000-yard passer last season. They did not have a 500-yard rusher last season. I think their top guy, I don't even know, they had a guy that hit 310 in the receiving camp. That was their leading receiver. So not anything really going for them in the, offensive department. If you, do anything, if you do anything at all on offense, you're going to start winning a whole bunch of games. They were a stacked defense. They bring back a whole bunch of pieces from that defense. I think they could have a chance to possibly be a top 10 unit this year. And if you put that on that schedule and you start to break this down, you're looking at UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers. You're starting to look at a win streak, right? You're starting to think this is going to be a hot team. You play Indiana after a bye week. You go to Ohio State. That's going to be a huge game. And then you get to close with UCLA, at USC, Wisconsin, and at Iowa. guys, this could be a 10-2 Nebraska team realistically, and you don't even have to squint that hard to make it happen. It's going to be a good defense. It's going to be a quarterback developing through the year. It's going to be a good Nebraska team. And everyone's already going to say, oh, no, they're going to choke it away. Oh, no, this is what Nebraska does. I even saw a couple of those comments on our videos, right? Nebraska just chokes it away, just trust. Well, those jokes are kind of fun, especially to, historical power. But you can look down the road from us in Austin about the way that those jokes go once you get the right coach, right? Everybody was saying about Texas for years and years and years that, oh, they're washed. Oh, it's bad. Don't worry. Texas will find a way to choke you. You lost to Kansas, right? This is what people were joking about with Texas. They got the right coach. They developed their system, and it worked. And they went to the playoff. And so, I'm not saying they necessarily go to the playoff year 2 under Matt Rule, but they're building something, and I think they threaten for a playoff spot by the time all this is said and done.
Emmett Johnson's a very solid running back to pair with a true freshman quarterback. I like their offensive line. They returned 3 starters along the offensive line. Both tackles are back, and left guard is back. And this defense under Tony White, guys, they're running a 3-3-5. It's an athletic 3-3-5. It's a unit that gave up 111 fewer yards per game and almost 10 points per game fewer than what they did in 2022. They were an abysmal offense in 22. They make the jump to a top 11 total defense in 2023. Now, if you just get marginally better on offense, you're looking at 7, 8, potentially 9 wins on this schedule. I'm not quite believing that they get all the way to 10 wins because they do have a young quarterback who's probably going to make some mistakes, but the blueprint is there. And at the very least, Nebraska is building something that they haven't had since Bo Pelini, right? I mean, it's been a very, very long time for the Cornhuskers. If you can improve from 120th in scoring, 126th in passing, and give that defense some run support, boy, this could be a really special Nebraska team. So I'm curious to see how the Cornhuskers play this year. Would love to know your thoughts in our comments as well, where Nebraska nets out at the end of 2024. Coming in at number 7, just ahead of the Cornhuskers in our preseason power rankings as voted on by you, the listener, the Wisconsin Badgers. The Badgers had a very interesting year last year, Trey. I think we were all a little bit higher on them. Luke Fickell comes over from Cincinnati. He's run a very successful Bearcats program, the first G5 team to make the playoffs. And we thought the Dairy Raid would take a hold a little bit quicker than it did. Not the case last year, and we are going from Tanner Mordecai, transfer quarterback number 1, to Tyler Van Dyke, who has a very interesting career down at Miami. Wisconsin is a team that I think you could either buy in on and be very high on before this season, or maybe have your doubts and reservations. Which side do you net out on?
Man, it's going to be fascinating. I think it comes down to, can Tyler Van Dyke find some consistency? And really, can this whole offense find some consistency? Because the defense wasn't bad last year. They were 20th in scoring, 38th in total defense. You'll take that most years, especially in year 1 of a coach. And knowing Luke Fickell's track record, I have no doubts that he'll continue to improve that defense. But the offense needs to find some consistency. I feel like that's a recurring theme for kind of this tier of Big Ten teams. They have really solid defenses. They're all kind of playing each other with lack of a consistent offense. So if they can find some offensive consistency, that's going to set them above the rest of this tier. I like what they have in the running back room. Shea Malusi in the backfield. That's an all-name team for me. Sounds like an awesome French restaurant that he's going to run for a bunch of yards. Is it Ches?
Ches.
I've heard it pronounced Shea. I don't know, like a fancy restaurant.
Really? Okay. Well, let us know in the comments. I've heard it Ches, but Shea would be sick.
Shea would be awesome. It's probably Ches, but
I prefer it to be Shea.
Yeah.
Can we call him Shea?
We can call him Shea.
That can be a bit, sure.
Okay,
if he wants to contact the show and let us know how to pronounce his name, he's welcome to.
You got Ches or Shea and Tawee in the backfield.
Yeah, Tawee's also Tawee Walker from Oklahoma. But yeah, I mean, you get Tackett Curtis as a linebacker as well. Some really nice additions to surround Tyler Van Dyke. But I'm really interested to see if they can find that offensive consistency, because if Tyler Van Dyke can really revitalize his career and go out on a high note, this could be one of the most overlooked teams in the entire Big Ten. I feel like I've heard nothing about Wisconsin this offseason, largely because they were kind of a trendy pick last year and they were a little disappointing. I totally get that. But if we can find some continuity, if we can move the football, if they can improve on the 23.5 points per game that they scored a year ago, that was 91st in the country. We can improve that, just like we were talking about with Nebraska. Get our defense some run support, give them a break by scoring some points so they don't have to practically pitch a shutout to win. That's going to be a big, big jump for Wisconsin this year. The schedule's interesting to me. Obviously, the big non-conference game is a home game against Alabama.
Yeah.
Big benchmark game.
Good luck.
I mean, you look at the projection. I can pull that up real quick. The projected spread right now, if you look at the SP Plus in that game, is about 15 to 17 points.
Yeah.
I think that's about right. I think you keep that game close. That's really encouraging for Luke Fickell. Obviously, they want to win that game, but you keep it close. That's really encouraging going forward. And your start to the Big Ten schedule is manageable. Tough road games at USC, Purdue at home, at Rutgers, at Northwestern. Don't love the trips to Rutgers and to Northwestern, but that's manageable as far as road trips go. And then you take it up a notch for the next three. Penn State, at Iowa, and Oregon. That stretch of USC through Northwestern, however many wins they can get there, is going to determine if they're a true contender in the conference or not. Because if they're sitting there at 4-0 in conference going into the Penn State game, all of a sudden we've got a big midseason showdown in the Big Ten in Madison when Penn State comes to town against a really good defense, and Drew Aller struggles against good defenses. So I'm interested to see how they manage that entry part to the schedule. It certainly ratchets up a notch after that Northwestern game with Penn State at Iowa, Oregon at Nebraska, and Minnesota in the Axe game. So fascinating to see how they start. Over-unders at 6.5. I put them comfortably in a bowl game right now. I think that's a fantastic line, as Vegas always does. But I can see 7 wins, certainly, as a step up this year, especially if the offense finds more consistency.
I agree. I think 6-7 wins is the most realistic result for this Wisconsin team. But you know what? They've got their top 4 pass catchers from last year. All 3 starting wide receivers and a starting tight end are all back. They've got 4 out of 5 returning offensive linemen. So the pieces are set for Tyler Van Dyke. It's just hasn't done it consistently since his freshman year. Maybe that was him. Maybe that was Miami. I don't know. He threw a lot of interceptions. He turned the ball over at some really inopportune times at Miami. But maybe a fresh start, a chance to run the dairy raid. And suddenly, yeah, Wisconsin, if they get on a roll, maybe they're, kind of the dark horse out of the Big Ten. I will be curious to see up front what Wisconsin can do in the trenches. I really like Daryl Peterson, who led the team in sacks at the linebacker spot the season ago. If they can find continuity on offense, Wisconsin's going to be a hell of a team to watch this year.
Yeah.
If
I think that game at USC is a swing game for both of those teams. I think you will know how this season is going to turn out for Wisconsin based on what happens at USC on September 26th.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think, boy, we were kind of ragging on USC here. We haven't even gotten to them. They're in the next episode, but we'll talk about the Trojans in due time. We'll see. Wisconsin's a little bit of a mystery box team for me, but hey, that's what makes college football fun, right? Final preview of this episode, number 6, the Iowa Hawkeyes, much lower than a lot of folks have them around the country, but hey, you and the Jimmies and the Joes, you guys know some ball. You put them at number 6. Now, last year was maybe one of the most historic half teams in college football history. We had the 129th scoring offense, the 127th ranked passing offense, and the 130th total offense, while the defense was 7th in the country. I mean, it's just chef's kiss. Hang it in the Louvre. What
epic half team, the most epic half team of all time last year.
I think the patron saint of half teams, quite honestly. I wrote in the preview, and when I got married to a girl from Des Moines. A lot of her family and friends ended up reading our preview article, and they're like, you're spot on. Like I opened, if you need a good therapist, just ask a Hawkeye fan, and that was a popular line with the family and friends. So listen, offense, we're kind of starting over, right? Cade McNamara missed a lot of last season. He was hurt. Spencer Petras gone. Deacon Hill gone. Iowa fans are thinking they're lucky starts. Brian Ferentz gone. New offensive coordinator in the building in Tim Lester. Tim Lester promised two things: aggression and discipline. I don't know what aggression looks like in the Iowa offense, but I am really excited to find out, because if we can do anything more than a yard in a cloud of dust, which has been the Iowa offense for the past couple of seasons, then I'm in. I'm sold, because that defense should be really, really good again this year. I half jokingly wrote under the notable losses section that team MVP Torrey Taylor, the punter who was drafted in the 4th round by the Chicago Bears, is gone. So Iowa's safety blanket is off the team. We're going to have to find some new stability, right? But I think LaShawn Williams, very, very solid running back. One of the better running backs in the entire conference. Leaning on him is perfectly fine. They only have one returning starter up front, so they are going to have to rebuild that front 5 just a little bit. They're going to have to find who's a weapon on that wide receiver core, period. Now, the safety blanket, Luke Lackey, comes back. He was hurt last year as well. I think he and Cade coming back and being healthy is a huge pivot point for this Iowa Hawkeyes offense. Defensively, they're extremely veteran. I love what they have on defense. I would not expect much of a drop-off as well. Cooper DeJean, gone to the NFL. He's a Philadelphia Eagle. That's okay. They've got 3 returning starters in the secondary. I like what they have up front. This is going to be, I think, a normal Iowa team. I think you could kind of blink and Iowa might be able to get to, 8, 9, 10 wins. Now, you look at the schedule, it's a fairly friendly schedule. Illinois State and then Iowa State. We'll talk about that in just a second. Troy at Minnesota to start those first 4. Very plausible to say that Iowa starts 4-0 heading into a road game after a bye week against Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Penn State. Like, this is a year where it's kind of roll out the red carpet, score a couple more points, and hey, Iowa's 10-2, maybe competing for a playoff spot, or depending on what happens against Ohio State, maybe right there in Indianapolis. Now, this year, I've projected Iowa State to go into Kinnick Stadium and win this game. I have my thoughts about Iowa State. We'll talk about them more in the preview episode when we get to the Big 12. They're one of my darlings this year. I like the makeup of Iowa State, and weird, low-scoring games happen in this rivalry. Sometimes you just got to take your shot and call an upset. I'm going to call that this year. But even with that, their over-under set at 7.5. I mean, guys, 8-4 feels like the floor this season, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, when I was looking through some of the Iowa stats and trying to figure out, okay, well, clearly the problem is the offense, right? This defense could end up being the best in the country at the end of the year. So much experience coming back. It's just a very good defense. But I was saying, okay, well, the obvious thing that everyone knows if you're talking about Iowa is, are they going to score points? And Mitch, I don't know if you have maybe a bit of a pulse on this because you got some of the family. They've got to be excited about Tim Lester, right? Like he's got to be a little bit of an exciting point. I went and looked it up. He posted, while he was a head coach, he posted top 50 offenses every single season he was there, except for the last one where he got fired. This is good offensive production out of, it is a G5 and not necessarily a power program that you're not going to expect, massive things out of on a typical year-to-year basis. And he's putting up top 50 scoring offenses. If Iowa puts up a top 50 scoring offense, you're talking about a playoff team, probably, just out of how good this defense is. You're talking about a team who could, threaten and end up maybe hosting a playoff game, which I think all of us would be absolutely here for if that were to happen. It's just going to be about where the dynamicism comes, right? You don't necessarily see the big-time playmakers. Yes, Cade McNamara, he's a stud. He won a bunch of games at Michigan. Can he turn that back on? It's been a little while since he's been at Michigan, right? Bad year last year. Obviously, he was injured, but it's not like he was lighting the world on fire before that. And so, he's going to be coming back. Can he kind of get back to that? I'd be curious to see that. Yes, you've got a stud tight end. Who else you throwing the ball to, right? There's just a lot of questions about where can this offense go based on the personnel. I think the scheme is going to be just fine. And I think obviously that was the big problem going into the offseason was, hey, you couldn't scheme your way into a first down. And, when guys are cheering that loud for the punter because, punting is just how fun it is up there.
Right.
I don't know. Like it's a sad scene for me. I wouldn't like to be.
T-shirts were made in honor of Torrey Taylor.
Right. And when you're making t-shirt, and he's a good punter, don't get me wrong, like that's a part of the game. But if you're really, really cheering on your punter because he's like your team's favorite player, I don't know. I don't know if that's a great sign for your program. So I think at the end of the day, dynamicism, figuring out how to kind of take that next step, because they can win a bunch of games when it comes to sort of in the conference. It's going to be at that top end of the conference. If they can make it back to a conference championship game, I would personally doubt it right now, but if they could even make it to that point, can you compete against whoever that other guy is across from you? If it's Oregon, if it's Ohio State, whoever that is, can you keep up with them? And then if you can, let's go miracle season and make it to the playoff. Like there's good offenses across this country. Can you keep up? Right. And I think, playoff might be a little premature for where Iowa is right now. But I mean, hey, like crazy things have happened. They will have a good enough defense that if they can score points, like they could make it to the playoff. I'm going to have to kind of watch and see how those first couple games go to say, oh, that's their, primary receiver. Oh, that running back is electric. Oh, he can go get you that first down. I'm going to have to wait to see until that happens.
I don't think playoff is premature because they went 10-2 with the worst Power 5 offense, arguably, of all time last year.
Yeah.
Like we forget that. I know they got blitzed in the Big Ten championship game. I know they benefited from a soft old Big Ten West schedule. I know all that, but 10-2 is still a very respectable record that will get you into the playoff in the Big Ten more often than not. And they did it. If they can just get marginal improvement on offense, if they can just not be the worst offense statistically of all time at the Power 5 level, then I mean, I think we can expect. I think the playoff is a reasonable goal for Iowa this year. The defense shouldn't take too much of a step back. Kirk Ferentz has earned the right for us to trust that he's going to put a good defense on the field. Mm-hmm. We can just move the ball, man. We can just move the ball consistently, choose some clock. I don't care how you do it. Just don't be an embarrassment on offense. You're going to be right there knocking on the door.
That's right. Just win games, 17-7 instead of 10-7, and we're fine.
Whoa, big guy. Hold on. That's some big numbers. 17 points.
Lester proved that he could.
They are the New York Jets.
Lester proved that he could run some offenses at Western Michigan. As you mentioned, he did eventually get fired there. It was most recently with the Green Bay Packers as an offensive analyst. Last thing I'll say before we close this episode out, not too many previews that you see a fullback in their projected starters. Mm-hmm. Shout out Rusty Van Wetsinga for making the preview. Yeah. And he's just a freshman. He's a true freshman listing at 6'2", 240. So that is just a healthy growing Midwestern lad right there.
I cannot wait to see when I was gonna say I can't wait to see what happens when he gets his grown man body. That's gonna be a dangerous boy.
Royce Dakin, new punter for Iowa, penciled in by Phil Steele, true freshman. Check him out.
True freshman. Boy, I mean, talk about stepping into the shoes of a legend. That's it's tough for a 19-year-old.
6'2", 204, according to my magazine. That's not a small kid either.
He's a big boy.
He can put a boot into it.
He's a big boy. That's going to do it for part 2 of our Big Ten preview. Again, if you missed part 1, go back, listen to that episode. Part 3 comes out on Friday. We'll preview the top 5 teams as ranked by you. Plus, we have Jake from the Walk On Red Shirts join the show as well. All of that comes to you Friday, and then we'll get into the SEC after that. For Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How